What happens when the life you build falls apart, but you discover you were always strong enough to rebuild it?
We worked very hard for 2 years and then it ended in 2021. Yeah, and it was quite a shock for me. So I think it's sort of weird to me that it's still so emotional because it has been I think we're going on 4 years now, and I have moved on and I think I am a lot happier for it. But I suppose it just takes me back to how hard it was. And to be perfectly honest, it's actually a bit of a blur that what happened in that time. I think I just wasn't thinking clearly. So many decisions were made that I had to make, so with the financial decisions, and I think Kim and them were very helpful in that process. So I really leant on them a lot for that. And just so many, I had to move out and find a house, and so there's just so much that you have to deal with. I think it is just get a support system, surround yourself with a support system, and just have small little goals and work to those, and eventually you all of a sudden wake up one day and realize you're not crying every day, you're only crying every second day. It becomes every few weeks. So Progress. It does get better.
This is an inspiring, deeply human conversation about grief, about growth, and the courage to choose joy again, with money as both a mirror and a tool. Welcome to episode 2 of Life Chapters, Money Choices, where we explore the profound moments that really reshape our lives and how money weaves its way through each chapter. Now, just before COVID, and I'm going to say this right up front because this is a very personal episode for me, I went through a divorce, and I can almost feel myself cracking up as I'm talking about it as well. But the thing about it was it threw me into a world that I felt wholly unprepared for, but it was entirely necessary. Thankfully, it was not an acrimonious divorce. We were married for about 5 years, but there were 2 young children that really were at the center of what we like to call, it's a very kind of new modern term, conscious uncoupling. And it actually worked quite well. But I found myself in the midst of the pandemic, suddenly I was having to juggle the emotional and the financial complexity of starting over again. And that's the thing about divorce. Even when it's amicable, it's never simple. It's a shift in identity, it's a shift in your dreams, in your finances, and I think it forces us to rethink who we are and what comes next. And in today's episode, we're very fortunate to be joined by Sarah, pseudonym, obviously, for one of Kim Potgieter's clients, who found herself rebuilding in the middle of her life after her marriage ended. And she had to balance generosity with boundaries, having read her story, some guilt with self-care, and discovery with financial freedom. And really, when it was all on her, what this all meant. So we're going to explore that today and hopefully tease out some of those emotional and psychological and money lessons that we can draw from this. So I've got to firstly thank you very much, and Kim Potgieter is obviously in studio with us again. Sarah, it's a very difficult thing to have to wear your heart on your sleeve like this in a very public way, but I think it's also quite cathartic as well. So maybe you could just take us back to the very beginning and this new chapter. Can you take us back to when the marriage ended and what were the emotions and the feelings that were featuring in the whirlwind of what you were going through in that time?
Oh, gosh. So, the marriage ended in 2021. In 2019, I guess there was some sort of conflict in it, and we worked very hard for 2 years, and then it ended in 2021. Yeah, and it was quite a shock for me. So I think...
But it's real. These are emotions that I still grapple with now, and it's 7 and a bit years in. You have ups and downs. You have good days and kind of bad days, because no one, let's face it, Sarah, no one gets married with an exit in mind. This is not private equity. We're not the first ones looking for the exit. But sometimes in life, and certainly what I found, I was maybe very fortunate in my marriage in that our relationship actually improved as co-parents afterwards, and I think we're both much happier now that we've realized that we dived in too young and not really knowing the core belief systems that would later turn into such key friction points.
Yeah, for sure. So it's sort of weird to me that it's still so emotional because it has been I think we're going on 4 years now, and I have moved on and I think I am a lot happier for it. But I suppose it just takes me back to how hard it was. And to be perfectly honest, it's actually a bit of a blur that what happened in that time. So I think I just wasn't thinking clearly. So many decisions were made that you that I had to make, so with the financial decisions. And I think Kim and them were very helpful in that process. So I really lent on them a lot for that. And just so many, I had to move out and find a house, and so there's just so much that you have to deal with that. And we were lucky enough didn't have kids, so there wasn't that emotion in it. It was just dealing with myself, which was hard enough.
No, that is hard enough, trust me. But I think actually maybe even harder sometimes. I think sometimes when they're young children, you can focus on that and it gives you a bit of space and objectivity sometimes. You weren't solely dependent on your husband financially, were you? I mean, you had a career of your own and that kind of thing.
Yes, so I did have a career. I actually had resigned. I had resigned actually at the end of 2019, and then COVID hit. I was lucky enough to have quite a good network, and people just reached out to me to do consulting. So I ended up consulting. And before I resigned, I had saved quite a lot of money. I'd saved a year's salary, knowing that I was just looking for something a bit different. So, and then it did take me I did have a couple of contracts, but it did take me by surprise to then get divorced. So there was this panic of now not earning an income, even though we had some good investments and I was financially okay, which I'm very grateful for. It did still sort of have a whole different dimension in that now I'm not earning a salary. So we were in quite a privileged position. We're both earning good salaries, had good investments, and sort of lived the high life. And so it does all of a sudden make you quite panicky in that now I'm the only one that has to provide for my future. When you're used to a certain lifestyle, you sort of think you have to maybe sort of tone down some of those, fun a little bit. Yes, and then I wasn't really sure what I wanted to be doing. And so that, so while I was having to find a house and move out, and I really loved our home that we were in, and so I sort of took on a project of renovating a new spot as a focus. So I think that was one of the decisions that Kim and them maybe thought maybe it wasn't a great one, did encourage me to rent, but I thought I would probably never move out the house, so it could have been a bit cozy with with all three of us in the house still. So I needed a house or a project really, and to make a home, something that I was excited to move into. So that was sort of the journey initially, I guess. And that took a good sort of 6 months. I sort of started thinking that I really needed to do something for myself, like I mentioned a bit earlier about my health and that. So I think divorce really takes its toll on you emotionally, and it's quite a trauma. And I just started looking into different courses and that just to sort of study again. I do love studying, so I do tend to do it a lot. I started studying in nutrition and health coaching. So
when the fog clears, you start developing this plan. But I don't want to get ahead of ourselves on that point. Kim, maybe take me back to the first meeting that you had with Sarah, and this emotional fog that you find yourself in, I can absolutely relate to. There was a period of about 12 months that is still very blurry in my own mind, and still things that I'm not quite sure of that I need to go back and I've made notes and that kind of thing. But you are in an emotional fog. It's very difficult to see the wood for the trees in that stage.
It really, really is. And just like doing the work with Sarah, you need to also be patient, because remember now, you as a planner are not in that emotional fog. You can see everything clearly. I mean, when I was working with her, I could see her potential. I could see how she could do it. But yet you need to take yourself back to being in that right position to be where the client is with them. And as you're saying, 7 years on, 4 years on, you wonder how you got through all of that. And I think through the process and what it is very much just knowing that you've got someone that you can support you, somebody that can be objective, and I think also like somebody that can help you put the plan in place, because you want to do it, but you're just not in the right mindset to do it. So when we did meet, I mean, Sarah says that I said she should rent, and I did say she should rent and she shouldn't buy. But when I've been to visit her in her home and I see how happy she is in her home, I realize, we often think and we talk about retirement, how you have to have something to retire to. I think when you're getting divorced and when you're going through a major life transition like this, for Sarah, it was a home. She needed a home. She needed a base to go to, a place that you could feel safe and secure in. So she knew best. She listened to her gut.
Yeah.
She didn't follow what I said when I said rent. She followed her gut, which is so important. And she found that place that was secure, where she could know she could go to heal to get herself through this.
And I think the important lesson in all of this, Kim, as well, is, we often, and when we spoke for our opening episode, you said you want to change financial planning, because financial planning seemed to be very formulaic, very kind of, this is the life stage, this is the playbook, and you didn't see the person behind the financial plan. And so while that in the majority of cases might be the best financial planning advice, it's not the right advice emotionally for the individual because of how important that particular component is of building a home and creating something with roots again was for Sarah. So the big lesson here is that no two people are the same. So as much as you've got financial planning rules of thumb, you've really got to look through at the individual behind this at the end of the day.
So, and that's why for me, it's so important that you take that time to get to know your client. So many times when the client comes in, the first thing they want us to do is have a look at what assets they've got. And they want to go there because that's where they feel that they should be going with a financial planner. So when they're not sure why we're delving so much into their lives, into their personal life, but we would do a disservice to go into the planning straight away and just start talking about the numbers.
Yeah.
So even when we had the conversations with Sarah in the beginning, it was around what is the number that she should be comfortable with getting for her divorce settlement. And I remember having those discussions with her, and I have it with many people going through divorce. That number, is that number something that you just carry on fighting for to get a higher number and then cause yourself all this pain and distress? Or do we, and it's how we like to look at it, do we work on what is a fair number that's going to be able to serve you for your lifetime? And if you're not having those kind of conversations and you're just seeing it as a number, it can sometimes be 5-6 years before anything is resolved. And what you've done is you've taken yourself through this conflict and everything like that over the numbers. So there is a whole discussion around what do you need and then what is fair that you're getting, because at a lot of times fairness is out the window because you're so angry and you're so cross, and you can in a way want to just get them back. And I'm not saying in Sarah's case it wasn't that at all, but the discussions that we had with her around, and as she's saying, she was in a fuzz, but we were saying, so what is it that you're going to want to do in your life? And she's going, well, how would I know? I wanted to be married. I wanted to be in my home.
Yeah.
And now you're asking me these questions. So there is a lot of, I think what you need to do is take it gently. And I really do feel that to do these kind of meetings, it's not a quick in and out. So if you are going to see somebody who sees you as a transaction, that's not the right place to be, because actually at the end of the day, all of this is a relationship, and you are, as you said earlier, you're an individual.
Yeah, can I add there?
Yes.
Also, I think the process, so although you had a process that you prefer to work, like mine didn't necessarily follow that same process. So I think you also had a look and see, I needed to make some decisions because I needed to know what to do with certain investments and that while they were, changing names and all of that. And so I sort of didn't want to go through the whole process of like internal first, but I actually needed to make some real decisions in quite a short space of time. And so we kind of flipped the process around a little bit, is that we started a bit what I think you would prefer to do at the end and just had to make some decisions and then kind of went back to basics, really.
How did you find navigating through those early conversations? It must have been quite difficult now sitting down and thinking about, the fact that and I certainly felt this way. I'm going through this emotional trauma. I can't even think about putting money on the table and talking about settlement figures. And it just felt so impersonal and disengaged from that emotional trauma that I was feeling. But you've got lawyers, you've got all of these other people involved. How did you navigate that space?
Gosh, I don't really remember, but I think although I didn't want the divorce, I also didn't fight it. And so it was relatively amicable. I'm not sure he would say the same, but it was relatively amicably done. Like we used one divorce lawyer. It wasn't too complicated. There were certain investments and, there was definitely a little bit of backwards and forwards, but it was more deciding what to do. And I suppose because you're in such a fuzz, you're not really sure if you're being taken advantage of, or, and so I think that was one of the things. I did get some consulting on the side just to know I didn't want to fight and I didn't want it to be prolonged, but I also felt like I deserved what was fair to me. And I think I always said that from the start, is I don't want anything else that isn't mine, but what is mine, I want fairly. So it was a bit more complicated because there's family businesses involved in all of that, of which I didn't want any part of it. But you do just feel that maybe, people aren't playing open cards.
Yeah, I've had experience of that, Kim, where, very expensive houses, which were thought to be fully paid off, were rebonded behind a partner's back. And then that emerges through legal discovery, and things can get really, really messy. But you've got to decide at the end of the day, what is the value to me for my emotional and physical health as well, to go and fight this for 7 years in court to get a number that I may think is owing to me versus rather just walking away cleanly in a much cleaner process. There's no legal discovery. There's no going to court. I mean, and these things are very, very difficult. But I want to move on to the kind of post-divorce fog clearing a little bit. And now you find yourself, you received a significant settlement. I mean, that can bring, I think, both relief and a bit of pressure as well. So what were some of the first decisions you had to make, and how did you approach them in that period after the settlement?
I mean, that's really where Kim and her team were so helpful, is because you don't really know. So although I knew what was going on with our financial, our investments and all of that, it was something that he took care of. I didn't necessarily agree with things all the time. And so it was quite empowering to actually be able to make decisions for myself. But with that came a lot of stress in that every decision lies with you. So if you make bad decisions, and so I felt a lot of pressure around that. I think I kind of went to what I knew and almost the same setup that we had previously, like what money I had overseas. I sort of wanted the same structure. But yeah, I think having money, it is a huge relief. And I remember saying, and specifically when I changed careers and that now, is saying I really want to help people going through that, because I don't know how people do it when you don't have money.
Yeah.
I find like at least I knew I had a roof over my head and I had an income, and still that's very difficult. So when people struggle, I can't imagine how they do it when they've got little kids. And
no, it's brutal, and I think far too often, just because of the way our society is still structured. And Kim, you can come in on this. I'm sure you've seen many clients who are in a position that is not at least as financially fortunate as Sarah found herself in that you're now divorced, and maybe you don't have the ability to buy a new home. You're just scratching to even rent, and you've got to start rebuilding your life. I mean, how do you start to take a client through this kind of earth-shattering life transition?
So often when the client comes to me in that situation and comes to our business, it's been many years that they've tried to push it out further and further and further, because for couples, they often realize that if they do get divorced, they're both not going to be able to financially manage it. So again, they do more and more damage as the time goes on. And then when they split, the confidence levels are at the absolute lowest. I think there's always needs to be that tiered approach, because the first part is if, like we're all talking here honestly about how many years until you think clearly, it's really not pushing that person so much, but letting them also look at their networks of who they can ask for help. And I say that because often that's what you need to do. You need to turn sometimes to your parents, you need to turn to maybe siblings and get some help for the immediate, so that you can heal yourself emotionally, so that then you can go and start doing what you have to do. Because talk about it, you've got young kids, you have to get back to work. Where have you got a home? So while you're in that situation, you need to first make sure that you get better yourself, because you only can do all of this when you're healthy. I mean, you are your greatest asset. So it's beautiful what Sarah's doing going into the health area, because to get your health better is the only time that you come out of the fog in order to be able to then do what you need to do. So we can't do it the other way around. We can't force people and tell them they have to do all of these things because they're not capable, they're not able to do it. So mine would be that, you look at your network and who can actually just help you just to get through this initial period while you're healing.
Did you have quite a supportive, strong network to get you through this, Sarah?
Yeah, absolutely. I did. Very, very, my family and even my in-laws and friends and that. So absolutely, I did have a really good support network and still do. Yeah, so I think it is just about every day getting up and getting dressed and doing something, So I think, you can wallow but in your sort of sorrow and that. But I think it is just finding the positives, and everything there is positives. And I think in the long run, I'm way better off, but it doesn't take away that hurt and pain. But I think, like I was saying, to be financially, have a bit of money definitely does soften the blow for sure. But with that did come with this whole responsibility. And I think even in our married lives, I'd always said, we did travel quite a lot. And I always said, I don't want to be doing that now and then be sitting in my retirement and not be able to do anything, already be stuck on the street and that. And so I think now I had that opportunity to be able to try and make my money work for me and make those decisions. But I still struggle with that because I'm not really earning a really good salary at the moment and still, building a business, it's hard for me to be spending money that's not really coming in, so it is something I really do think about a lot.
Take me back to your early money memories, that the earliest money memories that you've had, because often I think that also shapes our relationship, and it's something that Kim's a big believer in, and how we approach money. I'm quite a spendthrift, and it's because I grew up in a household where we didn't talk about money. Also, there wasn't that much money around, so now I battle to spend, and I think I'm on the other edge of the equation. I have this inherited guilt. What was your earliest money memory?
Yeah, I mean, I think quite similar in the fact, I think we also didn't really speak about it. We never went without anything. I think we were quite, I don't want to say spoiled, but we had whatever we wanted. I think my parents worked really hard. My dad did lose his business early on. And so I think that, although they tried to hide all that, and I think they did really well up until we were much older. But I think it's in my older years that I realized how they must have struggled. And I think that is a part of, me sort of being so cautious and trying to make good decisions and trying to be I can be quite frugal with some things.
My father lost his business very late in his career as well, but sadly, all of his retirement nest egg was concentrated in that business. So the back end of we also didn't want for anything in my early childhood, but as I was approaching matric, things kind of turned quite significantly. And he passed away about 5 years ago now, and I look after my mom as a result. But it has shaped my approach to money. I'm now like you. I'm very frugal with it. How do you, Kim, help clients like Sarah, maybe like me, get through this inherited guilt that we have to try and rebuild? Because you have to, you can't just live in this little frugal box and feel guilty every time you're starting to spend on travel or on yourself. You've got to start living again.
So we go back to that memory and we try and dissect it a little bit to say, is it my reality or is it a belief? So if we have a look at both yours and we have a look at Sarah's, it's not something that happened to you. You didn't lose your business, and nor did Sarah lose her business. Hers was a different life experience. So we examine that, and when you have to question yourself, is this a belief that I've got, or is this actually my reality? And you've got to keep questioning it. So what I did with Sarah, and in the beginning, she couldn't do it. So we waited a while. I'm a great believer in putting out a vision of what it looks like if it turns out well. And I remember getting her to build and do her first vision board of all the components she wanted to bring into her new life, into this new chapter. So when we could do that, and when I did visit her, I saw it there, and her home was on it. When we did that, we could allocate money to that, so that she knew she really wanted those things. Like her why was strong enough of why she was spending the money.
Yeah.
But at the same time, that whole financial planning process is going, even if you do all these things, this is what it looks like. Because so many times what we're doing is the fear keeps us absolutely stagnant, that we can't move forward. So we've got a balance between the fear, the reality, and actually living. And I think just by having that, and it doesn't have to be pictures, you can do it as a written plan, but having that plan of why you're spending the money, what it's for. It's not frivolous things. It's things that are really, really important to you. All of a sudden, it eases a bit of that guilt. And it's built into the plan. It's not something that you're doing in a negligent way. It's actually planned for. You've discussed it with your planner, and it's in your plan.
Yeah, if I can also add that, two things really, is that vision board. I mean, that was during the blur. And so I went, but that was in a time that I was just saying yes to everything. So I just was invited to go to do this vision boarding exercise, and I went off and I just paged through pictures and just took what sort of resonated and just shoved them all on this board. And then I had the board in my room, and I keep looking at it, but I don't really think about it. And it was about a year later, I looked at it and I thought, oh my gosh, almost everything on there had happened and come true. So I don't know if it's deep in your subconscious that it comes out, or if it is just visualizing that. So even the health things were on there, and I sort of joked there was a tennis ball, and I didn't really play tennis, but I play quite a bit of paddle now. So it all sort of happened. So I think it is just a very therapeutic thing to do. And it really did, when I look at it, it is really things that are important to me, So I would encourage people to do it.
There's huge power in it. And I find that the more we actualize, the more we envision futures, the more we set goals, and you can call it whatever you want. I think we all have different names for it. The more likely you are to seek out the things that help you reaffirm and build those things, be it subconsciously or consciously. And I think it's such a powerful tool. But then you also use the year of and. Kim, come back to your and strategy, which I think is fantastic.
Me personally, last year, I had one of my most challenging years of my life. And when this year I've tried to come through it, kind of that guilt of actually feeling happier, of actually feeling like things are going more your way, but still feeling so sad and still feeling like you're in the struggle, that the way I've managed to navigate my transition is to go and everything. So I look at many things and I will organize and go on a wonderful I call it a girls walk, but we went on a lovely walk on the Pondo Trail, and I was with a whole lot of incredible women, and I felt so good being with them, and it was so lovely. And I felt sad. I felt sad for the transition that I was going through and the pain that I was feeling. But that has helped me around this whole, what could I call it, the two sides of coming through a transition. And I think maybe for Sarah as well, that's what it's all about. It's about, you've been brave and you've been strong and you've fallen apart. And you just got to kind of work with that, because I think that builds your confidence in order to, as she mentions, just, get up and do what you've got to do. And then slowly what you realize, and what I've seen working with many people going through these transitions, is it shifts. So it goes from really being like 80% difficult and 20% where there's a little bit of light. And then you'll go and you'll start seeing it's 30% light, 40%. And then all of a sudden, the hard part is down to 20 and 30%. And that's why I use this and, because I think if we're either happy or we're either sad, or we're either going through a hard time or we're going through a good time, we're putting in like a false expectation for our lives. And this way, for me, it's just made everything more manageable. And I think in a way it's made me a better planner, because when I'm sitting with somebody, I'm also realizing that maybe, like the day I said to Sarah, just do a vision board. Like, I wasn't conceptualizing where she was and the kind of fog she was in. And I now know that I can relate a lot better to it because I've lived the fog.
Yeah.
I think that's such a good point. I love that. And because what I did realize is people also try and help you and support you, but if they haven't been through it, they really don't understand. And so I think surround yourself with people that have been through it, because people would also see you happy in that and just think you're fine, or just say, just get over it. You don't just get over 17 years, so, and just because it might not have been the right thing, you still have those mixed emotions, and so even though I think I am in a much better place and all of that, I am still sad, so I think it is really about trying to, I'm not saying discount the people that haven't been through it and they can't support you, but I think it is really difficult for people to understand, as in everything in life, if you haven't actually been there. And each situation is also different. So I'm not by no means saying they're all the same, but I think it was really helpful to be with people that understood and could support you in a different way.
Yeah, and just to understand that duality of emotions can exist. I can sit here 7 years on and say, with the benefit of hindsight, it was the right decision. But I can also feel a sense of trauma and loss and, a sense of, why did it have to go that way? I might use but, I don't know if that's the right way of doing it.
But I'm using and.
But I look at where I am now and I'm very happy. I'm building a business as you are as well. And it gives me a great deal of personal purpose and satisfaction. What has starting your own business meant for you, for your worth, not just financially, but personally?
Yeah, that is interesting, because I've realized that you do attach your worth to finance a lot of the time. So although my previous career was also helping people, and this I feel is also helping, and I feel like I've got this purpose to also help people that are going through transitions or divorce and that too. So that does give me purpose. I do, enjoy that part of it. But what I am struggling, because I'm not really earning money at the moment, like still starting it, I battle with that. So I sometimes feel very unproductive, and and then if I sit and think about it and my partner and I chat about it, then he's like, but you have got a lot done today, but it doesn't feel like it because there's nothing happening in my bank account. And so it's just been interesting for me to have to keep looking at that and just saying that, you are building something. It's not that you're just sitting around on a couch, but then there is this guilt as well, because I have some money to fall back on, that I sometimes think, does it hold you back, and am I not as driven as I should be, maybe? Yeah, I don't know. It is an interesting sort of dilemma that I sort of toy with a lot.
But you're very aware of it, though, as well. So to counter that, I would say if you weren't aware of it, then, maybe it would be a concern. But the fact that you're aware of it tends to indicate that you've obviously spoken through this with Kim and you don't want it to become a safety net.
Yeah, absolutely. We have, and we've done a lot of planning. And every now and again, when I have a little panic, then I go back to my plan and I look at it and I'm like, right, we have decided that this is fine. So yes, it is. And that is the planning that's needed. And I think, you were talking about earlier about sort of navigating these different or being able to do things that you've planned for, whether it's traveling or whatever. And I think it's also about having different almost pockets or budgets, So often, it's keeping your daily allowance and budget in place. And that comes from a different pool of money. But if if you've got funding for it to be able to travel, and that's kind of how we've done the plan, is I've got a separate budget because I feel, I don't necessarily need to earn the income on a monthly basis for my travel. We've allowed for some of that, or it's in a different sort of investment.
In reading your story, I want to spend with intention, not apology. And it's that kind of mindset. What tools, Kim, can help generate that kind of mindset to help break the cycle of scarcity thinking and kind of guilt-based generosity?
So maybe just to go back and is to mention that women are a lot harder on themselves. When I'm hearing Sarah speak, it's the same as a lot of our meetings where I'm trying to build her confidence and I'm trying to point out to her where she's doing so well. So we tend as women and I don't know why it comes in, that we're just so critical of ourselves. And I don't see it as often with men, and I'm not trying to, be sexist, but it's something that's innate in us as women, where we point out where we're going wrong.
Well,
so she's doing an incredible amount right. So for me, that would be the first place where we build from you're saying where we go from the abundance and the scarcity mindset, is just to get the confidence level right and to get that critic to stop in your head, to get that critic to stop, keep pointing out where you're going well, and to start seeing the places where you're going right. Because the more we see the places that we're going right, the more those become the norm as to the ones that we keep pointing out, the critic ones. And, we were speaking earlier about people who don't have the money and they're going through all of this kind of thing, and they always come out. There's no magic wand. You can't make money where there's no money. But what you can do is help that person to just get into the different mindset. And that mindset is just what you're talking about, out of the scarcity. And it's so hard to say it when they're in it, but more to change it to that kind of mindset of generosity, that mindset of that it's not a limited thing that's going to stay stagnant, that we need to get it to move in our mindset.
Sarah, I've got to ask you, what for you has been the hardest part of this transition?
I think it's probably just having to figure out, at the end of the day, it's just you, so you've got to make all the decisions, really. And so I think it is just navigating all of it. There's a lot of admin that comes with divorce, a lot of admin. That was soul destroying, really. But it just is one person having to make all the decisions. And that's why I think having like financial planners and that, like I've got, and that has just been hugely helpful, because that's a big part of it. And that helps you just feel a little bit more secure. Mm-hmm. So it is that, I suppose that looking, maybe it's my personality. I want that security. If we spoke about the house and that, I sort of have maybe an unhealthy relationship with it. That I want to feel secure. My home is my security and I want to feel financially secure. Yeah. And then I think the other thing is the guilt about, I come from a very sort of empathetic family and have done a lot of charity work and philanthropy and all that. And that was the business I ran previously. And, so I battled spending money on myself really, but I could spend for others all the time, so it's almost had to rein that in a little bit and just realize that I am also planning for my retirement and I can't just be doing that. But it does come with guilt when there are people in your family that maybe need it. And if you can just keep tapping into it and it's really hard.
How are you channeling that then into your new venture, this natural altruism that you have and have grown up with, the experience that you've gained through this process and this desire to help others? Is this all now coming to fruition through the business?
I think it will eventually. I think it is something that, I would like to raise money and be able to do it for people that can't afford it, So I think that is ultimately, at the moment, to build a business that actually earns good income. It is maybe looking at a different path for now. But I think it is, I mean, even even in this process, I suppose, in learning, I've taken on quite a few pro bono clients.
Yeah.
One is, I suppose, I'm also dealing with imposter syndrome, and
We all do.
Yeah, in starting a new career and doing that. So that's one is, maybe from selfish reasons to build my confidence in it, but also then to help people that, a lot of people that have gone through, well, with the Trump administration, like in my network, have lost their jobs and that. And so I've been working with quite a few of them too.
But again, it comes down to confidence, from what I'm hearing, Kim.
So what I also hear, and it's not just from Sarah, I hear it from quite a few people that are starting new businesses, and especially people who want to help other people, is that they struggle with what to charge. They struggle with because when they see what they're charging, they see it as a reflection on themselves. So I sit with many people saying to them, you're too cheap. You're giving away all your services, because ultimately what we're doing is we're building a sustainable business so that we can do pro bono, so that we can help other people. But unfortunately, there's always a window period in building these businesses that it takes a few years before entrepreneurs know their businesses have actually made it. And I know you want to help, and I know you want to work and give away stuff, but you first need to build the foundation of making it a business that actually makes money. Once the business makes money, you can start giving it away. And it's quite a different mindset to work with people. And I would say it's something that Sarah and I need to do more work on.
But it certainly engages from a motivation perspective, something that's very deep and core within Sarah. And I mean, I would imagine the idea of building a business that has as its ultimate purpose the ability to be successful enough to be able to provide pro bono services to women who are going through something similar that's so desperately needed but don't have financial means to access must be a huge internal, powerfully motivating force.
It is, and that is probably one of the biggest motivations for me, be it with that or working even with, underprivileged people and teaching them how to eat properly and, on a very low budget and that. So definitely it does motivate me probably more than myself self-motivated.
Just to wrap it up for us, Kim, because, the half hour's absolutely flown by. What is the key lesson that you would like those listening to this podcast today to walk away with? It's very difficult, as we've just heard, it's emotionally traumatic going through divorce. Anyone who tells you that divorce is easy is lying. And I had a relatively, as you did as well, amicable divorce, and it was difficult. There were layers of guilt of having disappointed my family. I come from a very religious family, so divorce just doesn't happen. To personal disappointment, mine was less of a financial burden, thankfully, or issue. But there are so many layers to this. What's the key takeaway?
So when people are going through this, I think the first thing is that we do is we just go so inward. So again, like you were saying, I came from a religious family, a disappointed people. So we go so inward and we make it very much that we're alone, that there's nobody else going through this. And it's not to make what you're going through less, but to just know that you're not alone in the world and that there are people out there to support you, and then find that team around you that can help you get through it, because you're not always going to have all the skills that you need. You're not always going to have all the emotional bandwidth that you need. And then having those good friends that are there for you, or that good network of people. I mean, obviously, I'm a financial planner, that financial planner that gets you to support you. So for me, it really is that.
Yeah.
Maybe I go back to asking for help.
And Sarah, you spoke about, in your marriage, the financial decisions were handled by your ex-husband. You didn't agree with some of them. I imagine you weren't really brought into the financial planning conversations at that level, or were you included?
No, I'm not sure there was a lot of financial planning as opposed to just investing money,
Right.
So I think it was, and I think that's what maybe I struggled with. Yeah. So no, I wasn't, I think it was always a fight. It was actually a big bone of contention a lot in that I wasn't, and decisions would be made and I would be told after the fact, So yeah, I think that was difficult. And that is the part that I found very empowering, to be able to make those decisions. But it is also quite daunting, I don't necessarily understand it. And which is why it's quite nice to go with financial planners that you trust, and they can do the work for you, so you don't need to understand it all.
Well, that's the point, right? We go to doctors when we're sick because we seek professional help. I'm someone who covers the markets daily on radio and speak to top wealth managers, asset managers, financial planners. I still go to someone else to handle my finances, because you go to the experts, you go to the professionals. But, if you were to go back and give yourself advice 4 and a bit years ago, what advice would you go back and give yourself to get you through maybe a little bit easier than the route you experienced?
Yeah, I think it is maybe just breaking it down and don't look at the long term, kind of just, take one step at a time, because I think it is when you look too far and you think like navigating everything by myself and, it just feels so overwhelming. So I think that is one word that just sticks by me. Like everything just felt so overwhelming. And, like I've got an amazing partner, which I never thought of. I really didn't want to meet anybody at that stage or anything. So life just changes and it does improve, and you stronger and better for it, really. So I think it is just, get a support system, surround yourself with a support system, and just have small little goals and kind of, work to those, and eventually you all of a sudden wake up one day and realize you're not crying every day, you're only crying every second day. It becomes every few weeks. So
Progress.
It does get better.
Yeah, and I think to anyone listening, I think anyone who's felt broken or is going through a divorce, hopefully this is proof that you're not your divorce, you're not your debt, you're not your doubts, you're not all of these things. We are vulnerable, we're imperfectly perfect human beings that go through major life transitions. But I would definitely implore anyone listening to reach out and get support, get help. And even if you're not going through a divorce and you've just listened to this out of curiosity, go and speak to a financial planner early on, so that if something does happen, you've got that support. And you've already got a trusted advisor and a shoulder to lean on and cry on. And probably more crying than leaning, depending on where you are in your transition journey. But that's all we have for Life Chapters, Money Choices, talking about divorce. My thanks to Sarah. Thank you very much for opening up and being vulnerable, also really sharing and courageous and taking us through your journey. Really appreciate your courage and your bravery, and you're here in one piece and smiling and building a beautiful new chapter. So thank you very much. And to Kim Potgieter, as always, remember to subscribe and to share this in your network. This has been episode 2 of Life Chapters, Money Choices. I'm Michael Avery, signing off.